Hello and welcome. I am the Restless Kaiser, and once again we are modelling for advantage. And today we're going to have a look at forgotten games. Games that we may have enjoyed in the past, but are long since dead, or those that are just gathering dust in our cupboards because we never find enough time to play them. Just pass over to future me now for a little bit of a news update. A little bit of news from the channel is we have been working on a merch store during the lockdown, and that should be up and available for you quite soon. We'll keep you informed. Obviously, you'll be able to buy things like t-shirts and so forth. I'm sure you know how it all works. Anyway, more on that later. As you can probably imagine, we've got quite a few contributions in today. So first up, Mr. Johnny B.
Thank you, Kaiser. This week is Forgotten Games, or games that have just sort of fizzled out, really. And I'm going to talk to you about one of my favourite games from one of my favourite documentaries, Terminator Genisys. It's alright. Shonky film for the franchise where they turned the ominous Skynet into a phone app. It's an alright game. Let's go down to the what's it and have a little look at some of the key features of the game that I quite enjoyed. Boop. So folks, some of the key features which I really enjoyed about this game was you'd roll for initiative at the beginning of the turn sequence, and then if you won that, you would then see how many dudes you could activate by rolling a fate dice. Now the fate dice had 1 or 2 or just a single fate. If you rolled fate, you essentially skip a go. Now you can sort of mess this up a bit and use some of the command abilities of certain things, Lieutenant John Connor himself, and activate nearby units, therefore making the fate for yourself. Other cool aspects of the game is that each model and unit represented in the game has got a different skill level, and that skill level represents a dice, whether it's a D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, even up to a D20, and it just added a little bit of depth. Humans were obviously less resilient than an endoskeleton. But yeah, fantastic little game, but it's kind of dead now. Anyways, let's go. Well, that's all from me this week, but don't worry, I'll be back.
For anyone that hasn't picked it up yet, Johnny B is a massive Arnold Schwarzenegger fan and is constantly quoting him. I did once ask him whether there were any memorable quotes from the Red Heat movie, I think that's what it's called, where it's like a police officer guy, to which he replied, "Cocainum." To be honest, having watched that movie, probably was the only memorable line. Anyway, next up, Jim Atet with something which many of us will remember from our youth.
Thanks, Kaiser. Jim Hotep here. And keeping on the Egyptian theme, I'm going with something slightly Egyptian themed. So Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a game that came out when I was in school. I was probably about 8 or 9, and TV show that accompanied it, a bit like Pokemon, if you know that one. Yeah, I assumed this was, gone the way of the dodo, but apparently it's still going pretty strong. The show might have stopped, but everything else is going. It's not even that old, because these old boys probably don't know about it. They're probably putting their pension money into the hobbies these days. It looks like one of them made this website. This looks like something from the 90s. Absolute trash. But what's this? News and updates. Still going. It's mostly COVID stuff, but it looks like they had a lot of stuff in the pipe. I've seen a few people playing it down the local game shop and that sort of thing, but as far as I knew, it was gone. Maybe after all.
It's time to
I actually picked up some of my old cards about 2 or 3 years ago over a Christmas and played with my cousin a little bit. What got me into Magic the Gathering and introduced me to hobbying in general. See, now they've called it Forgotten Games, but really these old boys, they've forgotten more than they remember at this point. Isn't every game a forgotten game to them? I've seen them try and remember rules.
Thanks for that, Jim. As someone who works in school, it is surprising that game is very much alive. What I always find strange about things like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon is the number of young kids that collect the cards and have no idea how to play the game. Anyway, up next, something from Mr. James' workshop.
Hello, this week's topic is Forgotten Games. Now, I'm a tad younger than some of the other contributors on the channel, and I did take quite a long hiatus from gaming, so I don't really have any forgotten games, but I do have some games that are from long ago that are now forgotten, that I've only played a couple of times and own the rulebooks for. So let's have a look at one of those. So let's have a quick look at what we've got. It's not forgotten. They'll come back. It's not forgotten. Yeah, let's do that. So this is Inquisitor. It is a game from Games Workshop in 2001. It works on a D100 system, but otherwise is fairly typical of the time, and frankly it has incredibly complicated rules. The one game that I played was as Adeptus Mechanicus player called Theta 7 Umbra. You could play as multiple different races. Notably, the Space Marines were incredibly powerful in this game. That was a design choice. You had a variety of different abilities for your character, and I decided with Theta 7 to level up Sagacity, which was your mechanical skill, and that is Inquisitor. So, that was a super quick look at Inquisitor. I look forward to seeing what other people have posted up for their Forgotten Games, and I will see you all next time.
Next up is Clueless Mike with a game I remember very fondly from my childhood, an old Games Workshop game. Tell him, Mike.
Hi all, so today's topic is Forgotten Games, and I've chosen a game that the world has probably forgotten, but I certainly haven't. I'm talking about Dungeon Quest. Now, this isn't the one that Fancy Flight Games brought out a few years ago. This, I believe, in fact, yes, is made by Games Workshop back in the 80s. Now, taking this box off, this is in reasonably good condition. Look at all these lovely bits I've got in here. I play this game a fair amount still. This has got 2 expansions in it. They're both quite rare. It took me some time and money to find on eBay. The actual game, I was best man for one of my best friends at his wedding about 10 or so years ago, and he knew that I'd played this around my friend Martin's house and really liked it, so he tracked down and bought this copy for me, so it has sentimental value as well. I'll show you a few of the things. These are the various rule books from back in the day. They're very different to rule books nowadays. They're all super flimsy. They're really badly organised. You have to look up so much stuff because the information really isn't on the cards. The game itself, for those who don't know, is you're going into a dungeon, you've got to get to the centre, you've got to rob a dragon's hoard, and you've got to get out. It is super deadly and super random. So there's all kinds of stuff that will just kill you. Every turn you have to turn over a blank tile from a big pile that you can't see. You could just fall down a pit. You could find a vampire who poisons you and then you have to roll a dice. And if you roll a 1 every turn, you die. There are loads of ways you can die. When you get to the dragon's chamber, there are 8 tiles on the floor. One of them is the dragon woken up. The other are all the dragon asleep. You flip it over. If it's the dragon who's woken up, he breathes fire and kills you. I just love this game. I've played it so much that I've even made my own custom boards for it that I found online, which turn it into, I think, a 12-player game. You can stick all these boards together and it makes a giant cross instead of a normal size board. So, if you've got a copy and you haven't played it in years, go out and try it. It's still a fabulous game. Just don't expect it to have a huge amount of tactics. It's more about having a laugh than planning your turn.
Ah, yes, Dungeon Quest, it was. The single-player game for up to 4 people. There's literally no interaction between the players from what I recall on that. You start in opposite corners, don't interact at all. But it is fun and highly random. As you said, you definitely can die on the first tile. Final contribution this week is from Jason from Gaming Nights.
Hi guys, it's Jason. Last week I put up a video on my channel based on a game, a mass fantasy battle game that doesn't use any miniatures. It uses only cards to represent the miniatures and stuff like that. It got me thinking about a game that I haven't played in ages. It was a really interesting game at the time. When I had my shop, I was looking for something interesting to bring into the shop. Something new, something different, something that would appeal to the crowd of gamers that I had at my store. And that game was introduced to me via my rep, which was Arcane Legions. This is by Wells Expeditions. Neither the game nor the company are in production anymore, so they've gone the way of the dodo. But this was a really interesting game, and it brought really fun memories back to me. I brought this in on a whim. It had an interesting theme. It was sort of like a they call it a mass action game, but it had sort of some pre-painted miniatures, some non-pre-painted miniatures. It had an interesting system from a retailer's perspective on how they were going to sell it, sort of a selling point of view. So I'll show you on the table a little bit of what it looks like and how the game kind of worked. And you can see for yourself and just sort of bring back memories of what this was like. So what you're looking at here is roughly a core element of what the game entailed. The game came in a big, you could buy it in a 2-player starter box. There was 3 main factions, which was the Romans, the Egyptians, and the Han Dynasty. So you think, well, it's a historical game? No, not quite. As the Roman faction is what I played, and I'm going to bring up some miniatures here so you can see. They are not the greatest miniatures, I'll tell you that much. But the Romans was the base faction. Then they had Celtic allies and Minotaur allies. That's right. That's why I went with this army, because they had Minotaurs. The miniatures themselves, you had, like, for example, the Roman. You would have the Roman infantry, Roman cavalry, and then you have fantastical elements like Romans riding bears. You have witches that could cast fire, power armored Romans. You have huge siege engines. It was a really interesting game, and all that was maneuvered on these boards right here. So as you can see here, you would plug your miniatures into the base. This would represent its points cost, its name, its facing. The dice would represent, white dice would be defense, blue dice would be range, red dice would be melee attack, chevrons would be moving. So you would have, could hold, say, 16 figures, but you'd only have 8 to 10 on a thing anyway, and you would have to spend an action to maneuver them around to various formations. Really, really interesting. You could obviously ditch this and bring in something else, like a cavalry unit, which would obviously be this way formation. And you had skirmisher basing, which was smaller ones. It was a really interesting system. I'm actually tempted to bring this back and do some more battle reports and sort of painting sessions on this game for my channel, because now that I've brought it out again, it's really interesting, reminiscing of how much fun we had playing this and how interesting the system was. It's one of my favorite systems still, even though the game no longer exists. So comment below if you feel like you want to see some more of this, and thanks for watching on Modeling for Advantage.
Thank you for that, Jason. So my forgotten game. I'm a big sci-fi fan, although often sci-fi games are maybe not as good as sci-fi stories, sci-fi movies. But I was a teenager when Babylon 5 was about, which it was a fantastic show. In contrast to Star Trek, not only were the effects very good for the time, compared to like wobbly studios and stuff that we were often getting. It hasn't aged well, I have to say. But it had an overarching narrative and a great evil that they would eventually go on to defeat. Unfortunately, they did another series after they defeated the Great Evil, and that was a bit pants. They released a lot of games around that time, one of which was Babylon 5 Wars. This is a hex-based, there's your start map, hex-based sci-fi miniatures game, which came with a lot of Centauri and Narn fighters in the box. And that level of the game was quite interesting, the interaction between the fighters. Although they were heavily imbalanced, they decided that the Centauri fighters were light fighters and the Narn ones were heavy. And they just got the numbers wrong, and the Narn ones just ended up being massively better than the Centauri ones, what I remember. And it was, if I can fish them out, it was in the Battletech School of Spaceship Combat. And again, some of these ships seemed quite poorly designed. I seem to remember the big Centauri battleship just didn't have enough frontal armour to take any kind of hit. And so you would play it trying to run parallel to the Narn ships, spinning, so that you were showing the opposite side every other turn, just as a tactic from having the big ship blown up. I loved this game at the time. It probably hasn't aged well, and I'd like to go back to it. The real snag with it is you know, I'm no longer interested necessarily in playing games with cardboard tokens and so forth. There's loads of ships and stat cards in here, and I do have some of the models. Reaching over, you can see the dust on these. I mean, these things are 20 years old, I think. So these are some of the Centauri ones, and they're nice models. But if I show you them in their unassembled form, they are horrible, old, poorly fitting models that weigh a ton. You have to drill them and pin them and shave bits off and fill it with putty. It's just a staggering amount of work involved in those models. I've got 2 or 3 of the big Narn and Centauri ships, and I just never got round to finishing them because there was so much work involved. One day maybe I will, because it is a game I'd love to go back to, but I just can't seem to find the time. So, recommending a YouTuber to you. Today I'm going to recommend Boots on the Table with Dom. Dom is a hobby channel that primarily deals with painting stuff. He also does a live stream with some other guys on a Monday. I'm sure he's going to tell you more about what he does, and he's been in the game for quite a while. Dom, tell him.
Hi there, this is Dom from Boots on the Table. So I started the channel to catalogue my gaming experiences. Like many people say, I didn't expect anybody to want to hear what this old fart had to say about gaming. I just thought some of my immediate friends would be interested in it. And people I paid, obviously. But surprisingly, it seems to be expanding, which is great, and I love doing it. So fundamentally, I started showing games that were taking place down at my local wargame club, Farnborough Wargaming Society, on a Friday night. We played all sorts of things, Saga, Black Powder, Bolt Action, any kind of tabletop game, Sharp Practice, all these sort of things, and even Black Seas. Primarily historical games, and I just like to record the games, edited them, uploaded them, and people seem to love the banter and the games and just watching gameplay, as I did. And that's kind of what I've always tried to do with the channel, is show things that I've enjoyed doing. I enjoy watching people do. But of course, we've gone into a weird world, so there isn't so much of that happening. So increasingly what I'm doing is showing off my figures, which was a very nervous thing to do because I'm not a great painter. However, I quickly realised that other people struggle like I do, and showing how I got around problems or ideas I had or thoughts I had is actually kind of useful to some people. So that's what I've been doing, and I enjoy it immensely. I do unboxing videos, I do tutorials even. I know. I do a couple of videos a week. Since the shutdown though, I've been doing a live stream on a Monday night with Ken and Liam from Miniature Wargames Warrior channel. And I have to say it's great fun. Monday nights, 8 o'clock, if you get a chance, pop in and say hi. And it's just become a real just general chat for 2 hours about what's going on in our hobbying world, what we're thinking about, what our experiences are, and we're trying to get a few guests on or what have you. And it's great. It's become a real focal point for a number of our viewers, and I love that. And the community there is around the YouTube community, gaming community, is fantastic, and I really love it. So there you go, that's me in a nutshell. Boots on the Table with Dom. Go along, check us out if you can. Thanks so much for modelling for Advantage, letting me talk about the channel on here. I just thought it's a great show. I love modelling for Advantage. They're really good guys. Probably the best channel on the web right now. Is that what I was supposed to say, Kaiser? Hope that was enough. Anyway, thanks for your time. Pop along and say hi if you get a chance. This is Dom out.
Thank you for that. Like all of the YouTubers that we recommend on here, they're all people that I actively watch their videos and enjoy their content. Tom does a lot of like Napoleonic stuff and so forth, which is incredibly dangerous content for me to watch. I do not have the time to start a massive collection like that, because Napoleonics is about having lots of it, and it's a lot of intricate work on painting those models. And I keep seeing them on videos and channels like his and thinking, I'd like some of these. I would like to play it. Anyway, let's go over to Mr. Johnny B for something fresh in Kitbash Corner.
Thank you, Kaiser. And continuing on with my RTB01s. Now, I've made a fair few characters for these out of the kit with loads of modern components. This one sees really simple thing. It's just an RTB01 with a Crux Terminatus hanging from his shoulder, just to identify that he is a veteran. This is one of my banner bearers, obviously, or ancients as they're called now. He's also got a Warlord Games Roman Doofer stick. I've made it removable so that if the enemy kills him, I'll give it to you. Like old Fantasy Battle, capture the standard. Another one of the characters to accompany him is, let's have this one today, a Tech Marine. This one pulls resources from all over the place. He's got a AdMech drill gun thing that comes with one of the kits. He's got Tactical Marines missile launcher loader arm. He's even got a Dwarven, whatever that is called, from one of the old fantasy kits, and a few other little bits and bobs. and a bit of brass rod, because that's like my favourite thing ever. Crux Terminatus again, and a bionic arm. Again from a Skitari kit, I think, from Admech. There you go, there's 2 of the characters, 2 more to go on the RTB01s, and then we break free. Thank you, Kaiser, back to you. The end of the show is inevitable. If you can, stay home. If you can't, try not to get terminated. We'll be back. Get me out of here.
Hi all. So today's topic is games that time something like that.
Thank you, Kaiser. So this week is Forgotten Games. Games that you played a bit, but they've kind of just naturally fizzled out and died. One of my favourite ones, which I'm going to show you today, from and based on one of my favourite documentary series, is Terminator Genisys. Thank you, Kaiser. Hello, folks. This game is for... Well, that's all from me this week, but don't you worry, because... Yeah.